Shalom and welcome to another Petachomor podcast from abedan, teaching Noahide Judaism for Messianic Hebrews. Messianic Hebrews being the broadest possible term you can use to refer to anybody who believes that Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah, whether you call yourself Christians or Muslims, or whether you call yourself Messianic Jews, or whether you're even Hindus who are just interested in the topic. Whatever you call yourselves, you can all be categorized as Messianic Hebrews. The original Messianic Hebrew, according to Judaism, was Edom. That's a word which has come to mean Rome and also mean Christianity in general, or at least Messianism in general. Messianic believers in general are called Edom according to Judaism. Edom, of course, was the brother of Jacob. Edom was a Jew, circumcised on the 8th day, went to the same yeshiva as Jacob, had the same upbringing, same Jewish education, but here he turned away from the Torah. He regarded the Torah as abrogated, cancelled. Of course, you're saying, which Torah? Because the Torah wasn't revealed until Mount Sinai. And we're talking specifically about the Sheva Mitzvot here, the laws of Noah, or the Derech Eretz, which preceded the Torah. So, as in the Torah of Mount Sinai. So, anybody who believes that Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah is sort of, from the Judaic point of view, from the point of view of Orthodox Judaism, from the scribes and the Pharisees, those who Jesus said to his disciples, obey them, they are all under the category of Edom. And Edom, of course, as I said, was a Jew, so he's absolutely a Hebrew. So you can be considered Hebrews, just in the same way as Muslims are considered Hebrews, because they are basically considered to be Ishmael, and Ishmael was the son of Abraham the Hebrew. So all of these Abrahamic faiths are all Hebrew. Nobody can ever take the title Hebrew away from you. Even if you can't speak Hebrew language, it's totally irrelevant. The important thing is that you're part of this story. You're part of this this mission, which has been going on for 6,000 or 7,000 years, depending on which of the chronologies you choose to use. Okay, so that's who we are on this channel. That's what we do. And you can see the title of this show is What is the Spirit of Prophecy? So I'm going to be speaking about the spirit of prophecy. Before I do, though, I should actually just read one more thing, because I always have to hammer home this point. I don't know how many times I have to hammer it home, but I do have to hammer home this point. That if you are calling yourself a Jew, and you are not recognized by the scribes and the Pharisees as a Jew, then you are not a Jew. And you shouldn't call yourself a Jew when you're not, because that means, according to the New Testament, then you're belonging to the synagogue of Satan. So only the scribes and the Pharisees who were given authority by Jesus of Nazareth to his disciples could have ignored them if it wasn't for Jesus of Nazareth saying to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in the seat of Moses, so do and observe absolutely everything whatsoever they tell you to do. And don't try to practice the Judaism that they practice, because it's not the same thing that they would tell you, my disciples, to do. And the scribes and the Pharisees will always tell you, disciples of Jesus, to be good Noahides. That's never changed. That's always been the case. And if you are listening to Jews who are not from the scribes and the Pharisees, they're not the Perishim, then you are listening to the wrong kinds of Jews, because Jesus did not give them authority. He didn't give authority to the Karaites. He didn't give authority to those people who call themselves Messianic Jews. He didn't give authority to anybody except to, he didn't give them to the Rambamists. He didn't give it to the Sephardim. He gave it to the Perishim, the scribes and the Perishim. The Perishim continued in Lithuania. And now they are in the Holy Land too, but they continued there in Lithuania. So this is the school of Judaism you need to be focused on. That's the Ashkenazi Judaism, folks. It comes from Romanian Judaism. So yeah, I've hammered home that point enough. I think now let's go on to the main topic of this show. What is the spirit of prophecy? I'm going to tell you what the spirit of prophecy is. I'm going to tell you how to hear the spirit of prophecy, how to consult the spirit of prophecy, and how to gain prophecy yourselves. But in order to explain all of that to you, which is not as difficult as you might believe. I mean, look at the title of the channel. This is a very practical, very realistic approach we take here. We're not some kind of pie in the sky group, although we do believe that this is the space age and we have to be thinking about space. But we are really solidly based here, and we're looking at things which have got a realistic basis. So I'm going to be talking about the spirit of prophecy and how you can cultivate this in your lives. Listen to this and understand, where all of the scripture comes from. But first of all, I have to talk to you about what God is, obviously. And so we'll start with a little bit of discussion about that. When you look around you and you see how things work, weather patterns, how the DNA genomes work to cause things to grow, how geology works, you start to realize that there is order in the way that the planets are orbiting around the sun, the distances between the planets, all of there's order everywhere. You must be aware of that. Everybody's aware of that. All the atheists are, if they are serious atheists, aware of that as well. Everybody understands that there is order in this creation. They might not all agree that there's creation, but they will say that this physical universe we live in does correspond to very particular and precise laws of nature, the laws of physics, physical laws. That's what they're called, physical laws. And these physical laws have to be so particularly fine-tuned in order for life as we know it on this planet to have come into existence. It's so insanely particular how precise everything had to be in order for life as we know it to thrive on this planet. Everybody who studied the matter knows that. So the real question then is, why do these laws exist? Where do these laws come from? And is there an overarching prime principle or law which means that everything else must be the way it is? And the ancient answer to that, from the theological point of view, obviously is God. Well, God designed this. These are the laws God made. These are the laws of nature that God dictated. That's how the universe is going to be. Now, the atheist will say, well, I'm not satisfied with that. That just seems like a cop-out, just saying God is not a satisfactory answer for me. I want to know more. It's a lazy answer. If we just said God made these laws, you could have just said God made everything appear 5 minutes ago with all of your memories intact, and you just think that the universe has been going on forever, but it hasn't. It's just been made like that when God just clicked his hands. So God is not a satisfactory answer from an atheist's point of view. Fair enough. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a good argument, solid argument. Okay, fine, great. So what is the atheist's solution to this? Well, the atheist will look for some other reason to explain why everything happens. And the major one, which is big and popular with the atheist, is gravity. Gravity is the big G, not God. G stands for gravity if you're an atheist, rather than G standing for God. Gravity is the thing that they think has done it all. And that's why when they're looking for the gravity particle, they call that the Higgs boson particle. The particle for gravity is also called the God particle, because it's the particle of that which causes all things to follow in particular laws. The laws of thermodynamics, everything comes from, all the natural laws can be coming from the fundamental principle of gravity. So, if you like, they have attributed to gravity absolutely everything that other people would attribute to God. Believer would say, well, gravity has also been created too. So they would go one step further back than the atheist and say, well, the gravity has to come from somewhere. And then you've got a different kind of an atheist, the deep thinking atheist, something like Michio Kaku, for example, who will go, well, you're right, actually. It's not enough to simply say gravity did it all. Gravity's got all the answers. Gravity is what's behind everything. It's not enough. You have to have a deeper understanding. Where did gravity come from? So something like Michio Kaku will say, well, the reason why gravity exists is because there are multiple universes. It's actually a multiverse out there. And in each of these universes has a different set of laws of nature, laws of physics. And we just so happen to live in the universe where the laws of physics are just so. But in another universe, the laws of physics are different. And there are an infinite number of these universes where there's infinite variations of laws of physics. And in some of those universes, nothing much happens because the laws of physics are different there and nothing really can come into being. But we just happen to live in that one of the infinite universes where all the laws are just so. And that's why everything exists the way it does, including that's the reason where gravity comes from. Now, I like this explanation more than those people who simply say gravity is the source of all things, because they haven't really explained where gravity comes from or why gravity needs to exist. They haven't explained that. They just said gravity is sort of the god of this universe. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But we should really ask, where does it all come from? And I think the Michio Kaku type answer is much better. I'm not going to go down the Neil deGrasse Tyson answer because he's just a popularist, a demagogue, and he really hasn't got the answers. I like some of the things he says, but he really seems to be in love with himself and worshipping his own ego rather than actually having any real solid idea about, where things come from. Michio Kaku is much more like science first, really, rather than ego because I said so, which is sort of Neil deGrasse Tyson sort of attitude. So Michio Kaku's answer is quite nice, except that that is no different from Michio Kaku's answer is really no different from a theological position. So in the end, he is actually speaking theology when he talks about an infinite multiverse. That's actually theological, and that's fine. That's good because it basically shows that if you want to go past or go beyond the Neil deGrasse Tyson sort of position and be more rational, then you'll end up like Michio Kaku, and then you've actually become a theologian because you're talking about infinity now. And as soon as you start talking about infinity as the source of all things, then you have become a theologian. That is actually the difference. Now, if you are simply going to be stuck on the gravity sort of position and you're not going to go beyond that, you're a deist. So gravity is God. Gravity does everything that God has to do. We don't need God. We've got gravity to explain everything. You're a deist at that point. A deist is somebody who recognizes that there's a power or a fundamental principle in the universe, but doesn't ascribe to that principle or power. They don't really say that this has any consciousness. It's not got any ability to communicate with you. It's not interested in you. It doesn't even know you exist, for example. It's just the power, the ultimate source of all power in the universe, but it's really unconscious of all of that. It doesn't have its own consciousness. It's not sentient. So that's a deist's position. The deist is like that. You don't, they might be saying, well, I'm not a deist, I'm an atheist. It's like, yeah, you can be an atheist and a deist at the same time. The deist is simply somebody who says there is a power to all things. And if you say gravity, then you have actually made a confession of deism at that point. Okay, so deism is also fundamental. It's just that people don't really understand the meanings of these terms, and that's why they say, "Oh, I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist." You can be an atheist and a deist. You're still a deist. And say, "Don't call me a deist." You might not like to be called a deist. It's like if you are a tall person, people calling you tall, and you don't like to be called tall. If you're a short person, you don't like to be called short. It doesn't change the fact that you are a short person or you are a tall person. You are. This is the fact of the reality, even if you don't like it. And we live in this time now where when people started to realize, but specifically, when people who call themselves atheists and agnostics started to realize that they were deist according to the definition of the term and didn't like that, protesting against that, we entered a period of time where anybody can say that they are anything they like. They can call themselves a green pepper if they like, and you're not allowed to disagree. You're not allowed to deny. You're not allowed to say the truth to them. They say, frankly speaking, you're not a green pepper because that's going to hurt their feelings, and you have no right, and that's some kind of cultural imperialism or something like that. So here we live in this weird time when nobody wants to call a spade, but a spade is a spade is a spade. That's what it is. You have to call things out and say that's what they are. Even if you don't like the term, a spade is a spade. So there are plenty of atheists out there who are actually deists. They don't realize it. They're not interested in the term. They're not interested in terminology. They get upset with the term. There are people out there who don't like to be called male when they have full biological and genetic masculinity. But they prefer to be called something else. And we live in these times. There are people out there who don't like to be called female when they have full biological and genetic femininity, but they don't want to be called female. So we live in a time when mental illness rules, really, and you call yourself whatever you want. Just call yourself whatever you want. Nobody's allowed to challenge you because we tolerate mental illness. That's the reality of the situation. We really, really tolerate a lot of mental illnesses in the world these days. So people have some kind of strange psychological trauma and schema issue going on where they say, okay, I'm an atheist and I don't believe in God and you can't call me a deist. Well, it's just another kind of mental illness, exactly the same as the other kinds. It's just another kind of mental illness. They are deists. They just didn't understand what deism is. So practically everybody is a deist, unless there's somebody out there who says, no, I don't believe there's, I said unless there is, but now even as I start to speak this, I realize how preposterous the concept is. Even if somebody out there was to say, I don't believe that there's any order to anything, everything is just chaos, even that person who thinks they can escape the whole concept of being a deist by simply saying chaos is behind it all, has actually made a declaration of deism as well, and they have simply declared chaos to be the God that they believe in. See, you can't escape. Once you try to explain something, you will end up with a declaration of deism. The only thing you can do is say, I'm not going to try and explain anything because I don't want to be accused of being a deist. Okay, then you certainly cannot be a scientist then, and you can't be interested in science, because the whole point of being a scientist is to try and give explanations, to investigate and find answers to things. So the end result is you will end up with deism. That's the fundamental. And if you're more honest, you'll go further and you'll end up with theism. Let me explain how even a deist, for example, somebody who says that gravity is behind everything, how even a deist can end up being a theologian if they're honest about it. Because if all things are determined ultimately by the nature of gravity, if gravity is behind all things, that means that everything is ultimately deterministic. There is no true freedom of choice or anything. Everything is actually just running according to a particular set of laws, and the first domino has been kicked over and all the other dominoes flow according to the pattern from there on. And you can actually predict the outcome of things because everything is ultimately deterministic. All you need to know is all of the variables. If you have all of the variables, you can put all the variables into a wonderful, fantastic computer model, and you can actually predict exactly what's going to come next. If somebody could put all of the variables of your life and your sort of nano structure into a computer of your brain, put that situation to your brain in the model, in the computer model of your brain, then they would be able to predict exactly how you are going to behave next, according to all the laws and variables that they have recorded. They say, well, the computer model said that you are going to do this next, and so you probably are going to do that next. Somebody who is who has looking for explanations for everything in the end is ultimately going to be a kind of deterministic person. They've been looking at determinism, unless they say, well, no, we can't predict it because there are infinite variables. And as soon as you mention infinite, you've become a theologian. You've become a theological. Sorry, you become a theologian. You've become theological. Okay. As soon as you mention the infinite, you've crossed over from being deist into theological. So if you say, well, we can't predict and we can't make a perfect model because there are infinite, and I mean real infinite variables, then you've become theological. If you say that everything is completely deterministic and therefore you have no freedom ultimately of thought or choice, it's just an illusion of freedom of thought and choice, ultimately everything is determined, again, you're saying that everybody who has ever written anything about God or a revelation or experience of God in their entire life, throughout the entire history of humanity on the planet, all of that is actually determined by natural laws. Therefore, you can actually argue that the natural laws are responsible for all of these revelations, and therefore God is communicating to people. That is, gravity, for example, would be communicating to people through poetry and through prose and through religious writings, etc. So in the end, even if you were a deist claiming to be a non-believer in theological ideas that God reveals himself and communicates with people, if you decided that everything was deterministic, you end up as a theologian, because people have. The fact of the matter is people have written things which they believe be inspired by God. And you can call it delusional if you like, but you can also can't avoid the fact that that is how gravity dictated everything would fall out if you are a deterministic person, if you believe everything is determined. And if you try to avoid that and say, no, I'm not deterministic, then I believe nothing can be completely determined because everything is subject to infinite variables, you've also become a theologian because you've started to talk about the infinite. So ultimately, you see that although everybody starts off might be saying, I'm a non-believer, in the end, they would be saying in the end, okay, I'm a deist, if they were honest with themselves. I'm a deist. But even if they were saying they were deists, the fact that people have written about what God has told me to do or told us all to do, if they were deterministic, they would end up being, honestly, theological because of determinism, resulting in people writing ideas about what they think God is thinking and what they think God wants of us. So there you go. Everything comes down to theology. And if they were going down the path of being appealing to the infinite, for example, Michio Kaku, then they have become theological. And if they say we can't determine anything because of infinite variables, they've become theological. In the end, you can't escape theology. Theology is where it all ends up. It's where it all ends up. So then, when you've got to this point, when you've realized that you cannot escape theology, it always gets to the infinite, or to the fact that everything is determined. You've either got predestination or infinity. And one way or another, you've ended up with God. If everything is predetermined, then you can say you can say that God is not necessarily infinite. He's just the next step, which you don't know how to explain. But then you always end up with the question, what stands behind him? And then when you find the answer, you can say, and what stands behind that? And then you find the answer, and what stands behind that? And you can always ask one more, and what's behind that? And what's behind that? And what's behind that? And eventually you end up with infinity. So even from a deterministic point of view, you'll end up as somebody who defends infinity, and you're theological. And if you start with a non-deterministic point of view, you will also end up much more quickly with infinity. So everyone will always get to the point of it never ends. It's a never-ending quest. It's an ever-ending story. There are infinite variables in this matter, and we cannot ever encompass it. It is infinite. It goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And as soon as you realize that, you have encountered the infinite, which is, from all theological perspectives, God, the one that we talked about in the first place. So, in the end, theology is ultimately logical, as long as you take the path that I've presented to you. Now, once you've come to this realization, you cannot escape God. You cannot escape Theos, the one who is communicating with us, the infinite one. You can say, well, he doesn't care. He's not interested in you. You can't say that, because if he was infinite, then there would obviously be an aspect of him who did care about you and was interested in you, because otherwise he wouldn't be infinite. He would be everything except that, and that's not infinite. It has to be everything including that, otherwise it's not infinite. So there is an aspect of the infinite which does care about you and is interested in you and knows about you and wants to communicate with you and is communicating with you. This is just a reality of the nature of infinity. And wherever you are, wherever you started off, it's just a matter of how deeply you want to think about this. That's going to get you to the point of discovering the infinite. Now, you can say, but how can it care about me? I mean, look how much suffering and pain there is in the world. Yes, it's a beautiful day. Yes, the skies are clear and the sun is shining and the trees are green and the water is beautiful and sparkly. Yes, it's all lovely, but the whole thing is falling apart, and God doesn't step in to stop mankind from destroying the thing. We're polluting all the water, we've polluted all the land, we're polluting all the air. We're even making it so that space is cluttered. We can't get out of this planet soon. There's so much space junk around. So why doesn't he step in and stop us from doing anything? He doesn't care about human destiny. Yes, okay, he set it all up. You say logically, according to the reason, there has to be an aspect of the infinite which cares about us. But clearly that aspect has to be like overpowered by all the other aspects, because nothing is happening to stop the destruction. Nothing is happening to stop the pain and the suffering which is happening. You know, the most horrendous crimes, I don't want to talk about them, the most horrendous thing you could possibly imagine, it happened and it is happening and will happen. And how can we say that there is a God out there who cares about us if all this is happening? Fair enough. It's a very fair question. It's a totally fair question. And so you've got some different answers to this fair question. You have some fair answers to this first question. And fundamentally, all of the answers which will give you, will make you happy, depend on whether you're a person who is motivated by hope. And if you're not a person who's motivated by hope, if you don't have hope in your heart, then you won't find any answers to make you happy. The answers which would make you happy will all come down to, you can't possibly know that. That's what will ultimately be said to you if you come up with an answer that makes you happy. There is pain, there is suffering, there's the reality of suffering. Nobody has stepped down from heaven to stop it from the beginning of time until now. and there's no reason to believe that that's going to happen again in the future. If we were visited by people, as the Bibles and all the ancient scriptures say, how do we know that those weren't just benevolent aliens who visited us once upon a time in the past, and who have long since vanished? Their civilizations have ended. Their planet was in a solar system which went nova, and they don't exist anymore. Or that the ones who knew about us don't exist anymore. You could argue that. So, okay, fair enough. And the reason that's the case is because the universe is ultimately a chaotic place, and it doesn't care about life. Life just accidentally came to existence. You could argue this and say, all right, that's a good argument. It's possible. Everything is possible when you start thinking about it. And the reason why they would give this sort of argument to you is because they're basically trying to say there is no evidence that God cares. So why should we even call it God or even talk about its personality? Even if you argue and say, well, look, infinity, blah, 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 say, okay, fine. And there may be an aspect somewhere in some universe of the laws of physics being conscious or being created by a conscious being who actually cared. But clearly in this universe, the conscious being doesn't care. So, okay, fine. So there is a universe out there which it does care. What about the possibility of a universe out there where it does care and it knows about you in this universe? That has to exist too. Sure, it has to exist because infinity dictates it has to exist. But where is his activity? Why isn't he doing anything? You always come down to this question. Well, why isn't he doing anything for us now? Why isn't it making things better right now? Why does he let the wicked thrive and the good suffer? This is what Moses asked. This is the question in the Bible. This is a question on everybody's lips. And the sort of Buddhist sort of answer is, well, it just is. It just happens. Evil just is. Wickedness just is. So stop worrying about it. And that causes you to be callous and uncaring and unsympathetic and cold-hearted to other people's suffering. Suffering is a reality of life. Accept it. It just happens. Tough luck. That's the way it is. That's not actually a very compassionate solution. So, well, suffering happens, and if I didn't consciously subscribe to suffering, if I didn't make an active choice, if I didn't give consent to suffer, then being subject to suffering is evil. You can't do that to somebody and say you're good. You can't say it's for the greater good. I'm doing an experiment and I didn't inform you about it. Surely you're infinite. You can find a way to inform me about it. You don't have to subject me to suffering without me knowing or giving my consent, right? I have to give my consent. Otherwise, it's evil. And so here we have something called saying, okay, they acknowledge that there is a deity. They acknowledge that it's ultimately you're going to find the infinite in the deity, and then they acknowledge that it's a theos. There is a theos there, a God who is intelligent. But because there doesn't seem to be any consent given by the subjects who are suffering, they say that this is not a theology or a theism, but it's a dystheism. Dystheism means there is an intelligent God out there, but he doesn't like us. He actually doesn't have any compassion for us, and he subjects us to suffering without our consent. He is therefore evil, and this is called dystheism. That actually is a position out there too. Well, dystheism is what the world looks like, and that's basically why you can have all the creative people, all the philosophers and artists and musicians out there who can get super depressed in the end and say, what is it all for? You don't give a damn. We might as well just become nihilistic and give up because you hate us, and so we can hate you. So this is a kind of results in an anti-Godism, an atheism, which is the true definition of atheism. It's like, I recognize that there's God out there, but that God is dystheistic, and therefore I think I am morally superior to him, and therefore I hate him, and I despise him, and I will fight against him, it, her, whatever, forever, because it is cruel, and it has no right to do to life what it is doing to life. It shouldn't have given the concept of justice to people who are never going to have their sense of justice satisfied. It shouldn't have given the sense of anxiety to creatures which are going to live forever with anxiety, right? So it's cruel, and therefore I hate it. That's the position of a dystheist. And that is ultimately where a lot of negativity comes from in in the creative world and in the philosophical world. When you read most philosophers, they're all very depressed because ultimately they've thought about this and they've come to the conclusion you can't do anything about it. Now, the reason why they're depressed is pretty rational, seems pretty straightforward, but it also brings us finally to the point that I said we're going to be talking about. And I said we have to talk about this first in order to understand the nature of God before we can speak about the spirit of prophecy. So now we arrive at the spirit of prophecy. If you're depressed about it, it's because you haven't had the spirit of prophecy explain things to you. But if the spirit of prophecy, if you open your mind to it, open your mind to the spirit of prophecy to start explaining things to you, then you won't be depressed anymore. So what is the spirit of prophecy? It's hope. The spirit of prophecy, very simple, very, very simple, is hope. You're a hopeful person. You hope that all of this has a purpose. And you hope that God is not evil. You hope that there is an aspect of God which is more powerful than the aspect of God which seems to be inflicting suffering on everybody without anybody's consent. You hope that that's the case. And this hope is the light in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. It is the light of mankind. It guides mankind, and it is life. So this is the spirit of prophecy. Hope is the spirit of prophecy. If you listen to the spirit of prophecy, hope will reveal to you that, yes, indeed, actually, you were fully informed about it. It has to be the case. You were fully informed about the suffering that was going to happen in the planet, suffering and death which was going to come. And yet you chose it freely. You made a free choice to accept it all. You made a free choice to accept it all, even though you were fully informed beforehand. This is not possible to know for a fact for certain at all. It is only a revelation of hope which makes this obvious. This is obvious because hope dictates that has to be the case. Hope dictates that has to be the case. And those people say hope, and they turn off the channel and move on somewhere else. They are people who don't have the spirit of prophecy. They don't hear the voice of God, and they are destined to be, in the outer darkness with the gnashing of teeth, and there's weeping forever and ever, because that is the destination where they're going. God is not good. God doesn't care about you, and he's not interested in trying to make things better, and he didn't ask your consent to inflict all of this upon you. Only hope, only those people who have hope, who have received hope, who hear hope, can say, no, that's not the truth. The truth is God is good. God is lovely. He wouldn't have done this to me without telling me about it first. It all has to, there has to be a reason. And that is exactly the spirit of prophecy which spoke to Abraham, where Abraham realizes we had to choose this. We had to make a decision. We had to have been informed. And there is the revelation of the Garden of Eden. Yes, you were created somewhere much better. You were told that if you eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you'll be trapped in a place of suffering and pain, and then you will die. That's what the tree of knowledge of good and evil is about. You will suffer and die. If you eat this, you will die. Okay? The end of the life will come. Okay? So hope reveals that this was the case. You were told about it, but you decided to ignore the better advice because you were ignorant, and you went for it anyway. Now, the dystheist will say, well, wait a second. If God is infinite, he knew that you were going to choose that anyway. Why did he even give you the choice? It's a fair argument. Why did he even give you the choice? If he knew that if he's infinite, he knew that you were going to do this. When at the point that he created you and gave you all this experience of a pleasurable paradise, and then informed you, don't eat from this tree of knowledge of good and evil. You will suffer, you will die. But he knew, even when he was saying that, he knew that you're going to eat from that tree. Why did he even put it accessible to you? Why didn't he make it completely inaccessible to you? If for some reason it had to exist, why did he even allow it to be accessible to you? And the hope will also reveal the answer as well here. Without hope, you're right. That's nasty. That's not good. That's bad. Again, you fall into the dystheist sort of camp. And you've lost hope. God is bad. God does this because he's mad. He's nasty. He's cruel. But hope says, no, he's not cruel. There's a reason for it. There's a reason for it. Now, what could possibly be the reason? What scenario is possible that somebody would allow somebody that they love to suffer and tell them not to, but know that they're going to do that? What possible situation is this? And as time goes by and we get further and further away from good parenting, we lose sight of this more. But very fundamentally this, you can't understand God's reason for doing that unless you have been a parent. You can tell, and you will tell your children, don't do this. This is bad. This will hurt. Even you will die if you do this. But there comes a point where you have to allow your child to experiment with something at a safe, and you have to observe at a safe distance so you can snatch your child away from the trouble before it gets out of control. You have to allow at some point in the child's life, the child to strike a match, for example, to learn how to use a lighter. You have to. And you have to be there supervising to make sure that you can snatch them away from trouble when it happens. So you say, don't do this. This is dangerous. Do not play with fire. But somewhere along the line, you know you're going to have to allow your child to play with fire if they're going to allow them to learn how to make a campfire, for example, which is a very useful skill. They've got to learn how to build a fire. Mankind wouldn't have survived if we didn't learn how to build a fire. They've got to learn how to build a fire. So you've got to let them do that, and you've got to take them out of harm's way as soon as harm starts to come towards them. So the hope will reveal to you that we are children and God is our Father, our parent, who allows a little bit of danger to come to us and allows a little bit of pain and suffering to come, but is planning all along to snatch us away from it before it becomes too severe for a God. Since we are children of God, we should be able to take an awful lot of pain and suffering without having to be snatched away from it. Because if we're children of God, we're going to grow up to become God one day. So therefore, we can take quite a lot of pain and suffering. So hope, again, reveals to you that you did make a fully informed, free choice to suffer. And hope reveals to you that, don't worry, God allowed you to do this, knowing that you would do this because God is your parent. And God loves you and intends for you to grow and mature with knowledge and wisdom. And don't worry, the amount of pain and suffering you are suffering, or that anybody suffers on the planet, no matter how severe and horrendous it seems, is actually nothing for a God. And that is what you're going to grow up to be one day. No matter how many trillions of years it might take, you're going to grow up to be a God because you're a child of God. So hope reveals all of this to you. So that's what the spirit of prophecy is. And as long as you hold on to hope, you will never lose the answers. Only when you lose hope, then you lose the answers. Because once you've lost hope, you've lost the spirit of prophecy, you have no more answers. Everything is just bad. Everything is happening because it's all nasty. There's nothing but chaos. It's all for nothing. It's all going to be in vain in the end. It's all pointless. That's what hopelessness leads you to. Now, the interesting word, hopelessness, is the meaning behind the Judeo-Arabic term Iblis, which means the devil. It's the name of the devil in Judeo-Arabic is Iblis, means hopelessness. So you can either listen to hopelessness, Iblis, or you can listen to the spirit of prophecy, hope. And that's what it's all about. It's very, very simple, very, very straightforward. So you're either listening to the counsel of Iblis, or you're listening to the counsel of the spirit of prophecy. My advice to you for a good and happy life, a meaningful life, is to listen to the spirit of prophecy, hope, and keep far away from listening to hopelessness, the spirit of evil, Iblis, the devil, who's really trying to pull you down and make you give up all the time. So that's all I have to say about the matter. So I hope you found it interesting. I have a couple of comments here. Just a couple from Hitesh. Shalom, Hitesh. He says, Shalom, I'm very excited to hear the word on spirit of prophecy. Let's go. And at the end, he says, wow, hope is the spirit of prophecy. Exactly. It's so simple. It's so, so simple. But you can't just tell somebody hope is the spirit of prophecy without the full explanation that I've given in this video. Otherwise, we think, why? How on earth? Where does that come from? You have to explain it all along the way. You have to take them to the point of being the depressed philosopher, the dystheist, to see that, yeah, that's all very rational. That's all very rational. It all makes perfect sense. But there's no hope in it. Hope, when you start listening to it, it doesn't matter where you are on the planet, you get the same basic message. You chose this. You chose this suffering. And God allowed you to go through with it because he's your parent and he has big plans for you. And he knows how much suffering you can take. That's all there is to it. Hope dictates this. So be people of hope. Be people of the spirit of prophecy. Another thing about this spirit of prophecy, prophecy itself, the word prophecy in Hebrew, as you know, we promote Noahide Judaism for Messianic Hebrews on this channel. Everybody is encouraged to try and understand the basis of the Abrahamic faith. And in Hebrew, the word prophecy is nebiot. Now, Nebiot was the eldest son of Ishmael, and Ishmael was the eldest first son of Abraham. So, Nebiot is quite interesting because there is nothing bad said about Nebiot in the entire Bible. You'll find that whenever there's somebody come along, something bad is said about them. You know, even the story of Abraham, there's some pretty unusually critical things said about Abraham. There are critical things said about Isaac. There are critical things said about Ishmael. There are critical things said about Jacob. There are critical things said about Edom. There's critical things said about Judah. There's critical things said about Israel. There's critical things said about absolutely everybody you can imagine in the Bible, but not Nebiot. It's very interesting. There's nothing bad at all said about Nebiot. And that's because his word, his name, is actually reflecting prophecy. And prophecy is hope. And you've got to have hope. So in a sense, we are promoting not just the spirit of prophecy, but also the spirit of Nebiot, the spirit of people who are guided by and governed by hope. And that's going to lead you to be a good person. Ishmael, of course, stands for the wild donkey, and his children stand for the cultivated donkeys. The firstborn donkey is Nebiot in that case. That's Chamor. And Chamor is, of course, another secret clue for the one who guides you along the way and helps you find the truth, so that you don't become hopeless and lose your way and give up and end up in the outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So there are a lot of clues. We call this the donkey trail. You look for the donkey trail in the Bible and you'll find a lot of nice clues there. So spirit of prophecy is the spirit of Nebiot. Nebiot is an ideal condition to be in. It's the perfect Noahide, the perfect human in covenant with God, according to what we call the covenant of peace, the Brit Shalom, or the rainbow covenant it's called, because it's got 7 laws, each law corresponding to one of the 7 colors of the rainbow. Don't kill, don't steal, don't be sexually immoral, don't be cruel to animals, don't blaspheme, don't idolize, and don't be unjust. That's it, the 7 laws. Keep these 7 laws and you'll do well, as long as you hold on to the spirit of Nebiot, the spirit of prophecy, the spirit of the firstborn donkey, domesticated donkey, as opposed to the wild donkey, which was his father Ishmael. And you'll be plodding along gently and everything will make sense in the end. I hope you found this interesting. God bless you all. Take care and shalom. Bye-bye.